Welcome to Faith, Culture, and Society. Our last session, we looked at James Madison, who's the architect of the Constitution and the fourth president. Now we turn to another American who was strongly influenced by his parents' training and education. He was homeschooled. He developed a love of learning, and his father, John, was a famous lawyer. John, by the way, was the second president. He was George Washington's vice president. So we have many famous people here. When John Adams, his father, was called to go to France as a minister, he decided to take John Quincy, his son, who was only 11. And so at 11 years old, he went to France with his father. Later, he was taken to the Netherlands. At 14, John Quincy was then sent to serve as a secretary to the American minister in Russia. So here he is, 14 years old. He's been in 3 European countries, and now he's secretary to the minister in St. Petersburg. Here's just a letter to his mother in 1778. Now, he's only 11 years old. Honored Mama, my papa brings it upon me to keep a journal or a diary of the events that happen to me, and of objects that I see, and of characters that I converse with from day to day. And although I am convinced of the utility and necessity of this exercise, and although I shall have mortification a few years hence to read a great deal of my childish nonsense, yet I will have the pleasure and advantage of remarking the several steps by which I've advanced in taste, judgment, and knowledge. Can you believe that's an 11-year-old writing that letter? Amazing. Later, John Quincy Adams attended Harvard at 16, a little on the young side there too, and he embarked on a life as a diplomat. He was appointed by George Washington as the United States minister to Holland for 4 years. Then he was minister to Prussia for 4 years. He served as senator from Massachusetts in the Congress for 5 years. And then he served in other nations. He went to Russia and Great Britain for many years. He was sent with other Americans to negotiate the treaty that ended the War of 1812. In 1817, he became Secretary of State for the president just before his own office, James Monroe. He stayed as Secretary of State 8 years for President Monroe. And again, we see God's fingerprint, his hand on his life. Usually, the Secretary of State becomes the next president. And it did, and here it happened again. Well, his most important task for President Monroe was writing the Monroe Doctrine. And this doctrine stated that the United States would not take part in any wars in Europe between the nations of Europe. And the United States wanted friendly nations with friendly relations with other nations. It wanted to be a friendly nation too, but it would consider any attempt on their part to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, as dangerous to Americans' peace and safety. So this is really important for 3 big reasons. It stated, number one, the United States was important. It was equal to any other nation. Number 2, it stated all nations are unique. They're individual. They have their own concerns, their own sphere. And 3, it declared the proper sphere of influence for a nation was that it would be proper for the liberty and happiness of the nations. There was no reason the United States should be involved in a European war. And there was no involvement of Europe in the Western Hemisphere. So it drew a boundary. Over here was Europe. Here's the Atlantic. And those nations could not influence the nations of North and South America. This policy lasted all the way through the 1800s. So the Adams presidency, when he takes office as president, was very difficult, very difficult. He did not like to campaign. He was not a warm personality. He was a cold fish. He did not like to make promises. He just had difficulty with running for president. But he ran against 3 other men, and he had the most votes, but did not have a majority. So it was a fair election, but the election went to the House of Representatives, and the House would choose. Here in the House, one of the candidates shifted his votes to John Quincy Adams, and that shift made Adams president. Now, this was maybe bad because now he was accused of a corrupt bargain, and people made him live with that for many years. It affected his popularity. Well, as president, he fought for the Indians, the Native Americans. He did not want to push them off their land. He did not want them to be pushed westward. This was unpopular with many people in America who wanted that land. They wanted to move westward. In addition, he believed in the American system. This was the idea of using money to build roads, to build canals, and develop harbors. And this was infrastructure improvements. He wanted that, but that was controversial. Today, that's very common that a government would do that. He also believed in the Christian idea, the Christian view of man and government. Man is made in the image of God, and man has independent value. Doesn't matter if a man is handicapped, what culture he's from, he has value because he's made in God's image. Government, therefore, must serve men. Government is to be a servant, not men serving the state, but government should serve its people. The state is a servant to the people. And the American system pressed this truth. It helped with the infrastructure. It was a good example of serving people. After one term as president, one 4-year term, he was reelected 8 times, and he served 17 years in the House of Representatives. He tirelessly worked to abolish slavery. He stood against slavery. He stood against its spread into the territories. He was often known as Old Man Eloquent for his spirited addresses and speeches. Adams wrote that he read the Bible about 4 to 5 chapters every day, and he took about an hour. He said that in the Bible, you learn your duties to God, to your fellow creatures, and to yourself. He was perhaps the greatest public servant in American history. You add up the years he served, 52 years of service. He persisted to stop slavery. He persisted as the writer of the Monroe Doctrine, an excellent document. And thirdly, he saw that government was a servant to the people. And thank you for joining me for Faith, Culture, and Society.